Hello, everybody. Welcome or welcome back to Tiny Tiger Collective. And this is my corner of YouTube where I get to share with you my love for everything stationery and fountain pens. And today I'm bringing you a video in which I open up my entire fountain pen ink collection and create what I confess I probably should have created 10 years ago when I first got into the fountain pen hobby, and that is a catalogue of all of my different inks. I will be swatching all 19 of my ink bottles and also adding in a few extra special samples that have just been safely delivered to me yesterday from Canada from a very special friend here on YouTube. When I first got into the fountain pen hobby, maybe like a lot of people, I deep dived into everything I could learn about pens, but inks were a bit of an afterthought for me. So after doing a bit of research online, my first ever fountain pen is this Lamy CP1. And it's not a pen that I keep in my everyday rotation because it is terrible. It was such a bad performer. It would cut up the skin around my cuticles every time I sat down to write with this pen. And it would also leak ink all over my fingers from the feed. It was just so uncomfortable to use and to hold. That said, along with this pen, which I purchased from the Writing Desk, a UK retailer, I purchased what I thought at the time would be the only 4 inks that I would ever need. And it was a black ink, a brown ink for 2 conservative everyday uses. And I also ordered a purple and a green ink for when I was feeling a little bit more wild and out there. Of course, in the many, many years since, I've learned so much more about fountain pens and the stunning array of inks that could go with them, including their properties of shading, shimmer, and sheen. Since then, I have grown my collection quite a lot, but it's starting to get to the point where I'm forgetting all the different inks I have in my collection. So I do tend to go back to maybe the same 3 or 4 favorite inks over and over again. And I thought this was a good time as ever to start creating a systematic catalogue of my fountain pen ink collection so that I could perhaps be more adventurous and more intentional with using the full range of inks in my collection. So in this video, I'm going to cut to a footage that I filmed last week in which I received an order of fountain pen ink sampling supplies. After I go through all the different accoutrements that I purchased for this project, I also will show you how I've set up my ink swatching books, and then I'll come back and we'll start swatching my full collection. I'll see you very soon. Today, I'd like to share with you a really exciting unboxing. I recently discovered that we have a new local small business that I am excited and proud to support called Soe Soe, that is located in my hometown of Sydney, Australia. There's actually been some fountain pen supplies I've been looking to buy, and seeing this small business pop up, I thought was the perfect opportunity for me to add something to my collection that, if I'm honest, I suspect I probably should have bought 10 years ago. So let me open up this lovely little box for you and we can go through my items together. Oh my God, that's so beautiful. I wasn't expecting this pop of color to come out. Okay, let's see if I can keep this sticker intact, because if so, it's going in my stationery journal. Yes! Oh my goodness. And a handwritten note. Oh my gosh. Is that not the most beautiful shading ink you've ever seen? Fun Young Tongue. I've never heard of that brand before, but what a joy to be introduced to what sounds like a Chinese brand. And I think I might be purchasing that ink. That's right up my alley. Dear Helena, thank you for your order. All right, so here are the items that I purchased. Does it give you a hint what I'm trying to do? So I thought, now that I've accumulated 19 full bottles of fountain pen inks, I really need a better system for swatching them and keeping track of what I own and how and when I have inked them up in my pens. I hope that by having an organized system, I'm able to be more intentional about how I am growing and maintaining my ink collection, and also have the opportunity to use them more often rather than having bottles languishing at the back of my drawers and me forgetting that I even bought them in the first place. So the first thing that I did was I bought a few swatching stamps. And this is a company that's quite new to me. I can see here that it looks like they might be called Tao. I'll find out what the name of this brand officially is, and I'll make sure all of this is in the description of this video. But how absolutely adorable are these stamps? So they're cute little teddy bears who are playing with fountain pen ink bottles. You've got what looks like a little wizard bear here stirring a bubbling cauldron that is, correct me if I'm mistaken, a Mont Blanc ink bottle. And then here they are stacking some bottles. I really don't know these ones well enough. I do know that the light bulb shaped one I think is Dominant Industry, but please comment down below if any of you recognize what these other bottles are. And it was just so cute. There's like a little teddy bear there who is bending over, and the other teddy bear is standing on top of their bottom. just, I mean, I'm dead. These are so cute and so creative. So I thought this would be a lovely way to swatch my inks. Of course, I had to have an oil-based permanent ink stamp, and I went with a Shachihata black. This is absolutely classic, and this will be a nice neutral waterproof base that will allow me to swatch my inks on top without the outline running. Now, I got myself a tool, finally, to help me properly swatch and label my inks. This had many 5-star reviews on Soe Soe's website. Look at this darling little glass dip pen. Gosh, looking at it in person, it's like not that much larger than a toothpick. It is the sweetest thing. I believe I can use this little glass paddle on the back to swatch the inks and then easily rinse it out in a glass of clean water, while the other end actually has the dip pen design. So I should be able to write down the brand and the name of the ink using this end. So I thought, what a wonderful way in a tiny little tool to have a 2-in-1. And I didn't have to separately get a tool for swatching and separately one for writing. So I believe the intent of the ink muddler, just like in cocktail mixing, is that you can use that paddle end to stir up shimmer inks so that you help the particles distribute if for whatever reason it wasn't practical to shake them. Okay, and it's produced by Dominant Industry. So I already own Tomoe River paper notebooks and Midori paper notebooks. So I wanted to try some different papers. So I purchased this takasago paper made by Dominant Industry. And I believe, oh my goodness, I just saw the little cat. That is so cute. So it's a collection of little ink swatch cards. Look how absolutely darling these are. From the website, I believe the way that you're invited to use these cards is to swatch the ink color in the middle of the teacup. So it looks like a little cup of ink. And then you can color in the nibs for whether you're writing and testing this ink with a fountain pen, a dip calligraphy pen, a glass pen, or I believe this might be a marker. And then there's spaces there to write the brand, the ink. I believe you could even write the date of when you swatched it right at the top. And there's a little gradient bar. So I believe what I can do is color in the rightmost square, and then using maybe a paintbrush dipped in water, I can sweep the ink while it's wet across over to the left-hand side to show a gradient of what the ink looks like when it's been diluted. And I thought that's pretty much exactly what I need in a swatch card. These cards are quite thin, and I have quite a few of these in this tiny little box that should be able to last me even as my ink collection grows. Then I thought, let's add another paper in there. And I've got these very well known wearingeul color swatch paper with the droplet ink drop design. So this, I believe, will demonstrate how it's used. Oh, I think the ring may have made a little dent on some of these papers. But look at this. What a marvelous collection of swatch cards that are going to give me the option to really grow my collection. And I didn't know that they included the ring as well. From reading the description, I thought I needed to buy my own, but oh, that makes me so happy to be able to have this collection that I can easily pull out, flip through, compare different colors side by side so I can tell, which one would suit my pen best. I am so excited to use these. So, this whole experience has been really, really lovely. Ordering from Soe Soe, it came really quickly, and the packaging, the branding is done with just so much care. So here are my little supplies. I'm filming this early, and over the next week, I will carve out some quality time here at my writing desk, and I will take the time to stamp these swatch patterns onto my notebooks. I'm going to play with these cards, and I'm going to start building out my catalogue of my ink collection, hopefully in time for a very special delivery that will be coming in a couple of weeks with some ink samples from a dear friend. Please keep watching if you would like to see me play with these new supplies and experiment with my inks. All right, so it's a new morning and I've got a couple of hours before I start my work day, and I'm going to prep my books that are going to become my new ink swatch journals. So this one I have here is my Traveler's Train insert with the plain cream paper that I picked up from Traveler's Company Tokyo Station. And I decorated a couple of pages at the front, but I think I wasn't sure what I wanted to use this book for. And after decorating it, it just wasn't really vibing with me. And it's laid dormant for the last 6 months or so. So I thought this would be perfect as a blank Midori paper book for me to use for my ink tests. Now, I also have a Tomoe River paper book as well. Some of you might recognize this as one of the 4 books that you could receive as a random freebie when you ordered from the official Hobonichi store last year for their 2025 lineup. So I was eligible to receive just the one because I purchased my Hobonichi Techo A6 book, and this was the one that came with it. So this has beautiful Tomoe River paper inside with a grid insert, and I got this book very much knowing that I was eventually going to purpose it as a ink test book. And I'm so glad I finally have all the other supplies in order now to be able to put this to good use. So I'm probably not going to do any swatching this morning because I think I'm going to prep the pages with these stamps that I got from Soe Soe and create a couple of little templates while being able to take advantage of little break times and downtimes while I'm working from home this morning to let each page fully dry, flip them over to the next side, and then doing more stamps. So it's going to be very back and forth. So that's what I'll do this morning. And then hopefully I can carve out a little bit of time, maybe early next week, once all of the stamped templates are set and dry. And then I can go in and use this little muddler glass dip pen from Dominant Industry that I can use to do the swatches and also write the name, the brand of each of the inks in my collection. So I'm very excited to get that done. I will admit I made a little mistake with my stamp order. So it was on me. I didn't read the specifications properly or pull out a ruler, but I kind of just jumped to the assumption. Obviously, these were 2 different listings, so I couldn't compare the stamps side by side. But I thought that this would be much larger than this one. So I actually thought that it would probably be even closer to an A6 size. So I was probably imagining in my head something twice as big. I guess my point of reference was that I somehow imagined that each of these 4 ink bottles in this stamp would be roughly equivalent to the size of this single bottle. There was a photograph in the beautiful listing that showed how this could be used to stamp on a page and then have 4 different ink colors within each of these 4 bottles, and that would allow you the space along the margins to then write what each of those 4 colors are. I thought this was such a sweet and yet efficient way to swatch multiple inks, and I do have an idea for this going forward. I think this would be perfect at the start of a month in one of my Hobonichi planners where I could say what are the 4 ink colors that I've inked my pens up with for that month. So if there are seasonal monthly changes with my mood, I can detail all of them and also see the colors side by side with a stamp like this. I did just think it was going to be a lot larger and that I could potentially get away with stamping this on a single A6 page and then being able to swatch 4 inks in the one go. But I don't think this is going to be large enough to really show up the ink properties for an ink swatch book that I would love to use as a proper inking reference. So this is going to be lovingly repurposed for a different kind of use. And I think I'm going to focus on this wonderful little teddy bear wizard and their potion brew bottle in order to probably pop in, I think, 3 different swatch cards on each page and be able to color them in that way. So I'm going to stop talking and I'll include a little bit of footage of me stamping. All right, so my plan with swatching out my full ink collection, I think, is ambitious, but will hopefully be extremely comprehensive and will grow with me as my fountain pen ink collection grows. So I have picked 4 different papers and systems to test my full collection of inks through. What you may have noticed in the previous footage was that I was very new to the technique of stamping in my books. It took me a little bit of trial and error, but you would have seen my very first improvised attempts. And I don't know where I got the idea, but I was swiping the stamp across my Shachihata stamp pad. And obviously, I was wiping some of the ink off as I was using a swiping motion. So I would have to kind of swipe from different angles and different directions, and then I would stamp them inside my books. But what I noticed was that over time, I definitely got better at my technique. So my first few stamps, I thought the first attempt was clear enough. But as I kept using the swiping motion, I believe I was actually getting too much pigment onto the stamp itself, and it came out a little bit more blurry. And what you would have noticed was that it bled significantly through to the other page. And I was juggling quite a complex system where I was putting some scrap pieces of paper around a Hobonichi pencil board, and I was clipping all of this and stamping so that when it bled, it only bled onto a scrap piece of paper as opposed to completely ruining the other side. As I kept stamping, it became more and more muddled. So this one is quite a big mess. So I cleaned off the stamp again, and as I progressed, I realized that there was no need to be swiping the stamp. I only needed to tap it against the stamp pad, and actually less is more. So this was then my 10th attempt at stamping, and you see it's so much clearer and crisper, and more importantly, because I wasn't overloading the stamp, it wasn't bleeding through. It still is, but it wasn't bleeding through quite as heavily as these previous pages. This I realized because I'm at the start of the book, there's that little bit of that hump in my pages. And so I hadn't done a good enough job at pressing the stamp down firmly at that point where the paper is buckling. So Every single stamp was an opportunity to refine my technique. And you see, my technique got a lot better. And not only were the lines coming out crisper, but it was also having very minimal bleeding on the other side. So I'm going to roll with the punches, and there's no reason why I even needed a stamp to do it. But of course, if you could look at your ink collection through the motif of a lovely little wizard teddy bear stirring a cauldron of this Mont Blanc ink bottle, why would you not? That said, knowing how hard it is to manage wet pigment in my books, I'm actually not going to swatch my books on camera because it's something that I think would really require me to spread out with a lot more space and also space out the timing of the swatches so that I'm properly giving the stamps enough time to dry in between each session. However, what I can do is to swatch out these beautiful swatch cards. And one thing that I foresee is the difficulty of moving the wet swatch cards onto a different table to dry. So my university alumni magazine is going to come into good use and I'm going to use it as a little bit of a panel to help me more easily transport my cards as I start swatching my inks. So please join me and let's see how this works out. So I'm going to start with something basic and I'm going to swatch my Platinum Carbon Black ink. This is currently my only waterproof ink and I purchased this ink in 2023 from the writing desk. But it's one that I've struggled to find a pen wet enough to be able to have a good performance with this ink. All right, this is the first test of how this dominant industry glass dip pen is going to work. Okay, took it there a second for it to flow. Little bit dry, but if I'm honest, that's my experience with this ink anyway, so I can't tell if it's the dip pen or if it's the ink or if it's me. And now that's dumping too much ink. Okay, that one's a bit tricky for me to get it to work. Let me try again. Gosh, this is so incredibly wet. But I think I've got the flow down. I'm now questioning the wisdom, oh my goodness, of, of swatching my messiest ink first. I don't know what I was thinking. This is obviously a very advanced one. And now I'm going to have to change out all my water because it's completely black. Gosh, that looks really intense, doesn't it? In case you're wondering what I'm using off camera, I've got a plastic cup here that was a bath toy for my son that he used when he was a baby. I'm washing out the inks in that and then rinsing it again in clear, clean water that's inside this dessert bowl. I imagine the more I do, the better I'm going to get at writing, swatching, all of that, because this is a technique that's fairly new to me. So the next four inks I'm going to swatch are the first four inks I ever purchased, and these are the original 12-year-old bottles. So I bought all Herbin full bottles, Pearl Noir, Lit de Thé. This one ended up being my favorite out of the four and the one that I use the most. Lait Sauvage. Shout out to Michael from Michael in the Margins, who has been using this green ink to much better effect than I have. And Poussière de Lune, which is a dusty purple, which makes sense because this means moon dust. I'm already noticing quite a big difference between the wearingeul swatch cards and the dominant industry takasago paper. I find the ink so much wetter on the takasago paper. There's something about even when you see me write the brand and the ink name that it seems to dump the ink out. Whereas wearingeul, especially given the extra weight of these cards, this is a very, very thin paper, much like Tomoe River paper. This is actually like the thickness of a business card. I find this one a lot clearer. It was so long ago, I can't remember where I learnt that Herbin was a trustworthy brand, but it was definitely the ink brand that I heard the most about back in 2013. I have never liked the performance of Pearl Noir. It is extremely dry, which I've now learned is a complaint that is not uncommon of Herbin inks in general. But I can't say that I've noticed that my other Herbin inks, and I have quite a few as you'll see, are particularly dry. But Pearl Noir is definitely one that was a terrible beginner ink. I inked this up in my Lamy 2000 for the first time, and I thought there was something wrong with my Lamy 2000. It was terrible. It was hard starts, skips, every second word, and I couldn't imagine that I had spent nearly $300 on a pen that was such a poor performer, only later to find out that when I inked my Lamy 2000 in my pilot Uroshizuku Kirisame, it is the most magnificent writer. So I learned later that that was my ink, not my pen. Lidate might be the perfect ink for this particular swatch card of a teacup. As an ink though, as much as I adore this color, I do find it very flat and one-dimensional. So this was long before I understood all the different ink color properties. And I didn't know that you had stunning shading inks that exist out there. So I don't find that coming out of a fountain pen, that Lidate has a lot of depth. Poussière de Lune is another beautiful color. I really want to use it more often in my pens. but it doesn't quite have as much shading as I would like. So very similar to Lidate, it can be accused of sometimes appearing a bit too flat and one-dimensional, especially compared to some of my other inks that I've gravitated towards that show off so much more of the multi-layered, complex effects of shading. So I think for 12, 13-year-old inks, these are actually quite good to know that, if you store them well, keep them out of direct sunlight, keep the lids sealed on tight, they're actually very long lasting. And there's no reason to fear that anything bad will happen to your inks if you haven't touched them in a few years. I'm not finding that my swatch cards are bleeding very much, so I don't think I'll need to keep using this little scrap piece of paper. Ombre de Biamani is one of my beloved favorites. So Herbin Rouille d'encre is one that I use every day. For whatever reason, I decided that I was going to exclusively ink up my Sailor Progia Slim Meigetsu with this dusty coral. And it's been the single pen and single ink I've been using in my A6 Techo this year. It's an okay ink. It looks like a shading ink that's not quite getting up there, but it's such a fascinating color. I feel like every time I look at this ink, my brain desperately tries to figure out whether it's red, coral, pink, and Rouille d'encre, I believe, is anchor rust, and I think that describes it perfectly. I don't find it particularly wet or dry. It's a very middle of the road ink for me. Now, this set of Herbin inks that I'm swatching now, I purchased all of these just last year from Pure Pens. And aside from Rouille d'encre and Ombre de Birmanie, I don't use these next three nearly as much as I would love to. So I hope that by cataloguing them, they bring them back up to the forefront of my mind and I can really do a better job of comparing their test cases, how they look on paper, and make more of an effort to integrate them in my day-to-day use. I'm honestly not sure about this process of doing the water dilution test. I'm not entirely sure how it's going to be of use for me. And my technique is also, as you can tell, all over the place with how I'm actually coloring this in. So we'll see how this goes. This might be the trickiest and messiest part of my ink swatch that may not end up being very useful. Vert de gris. Even though vert means green, I do find that this looks more blue to me. Definitely a very dusty teal, but to me it's the color of old denim jeans. I suspect actually this one has quite stunning shading. I've only used this color once, and I think I inked up my Platinum 3776 Kanazawa foil Matsutora with this color and maybe used it for 2-3 days. I remember at the time being probably more concerned about how scratchy the nib was on that pen, and I didn't have any capacity for appreciating and exploring this ink color. So it's definitely one that's begging to have its time in the sun. So the next color is very similar, and without swatches, I really struggle to tell them apart. So I suspect that this exercise is going to help me appreciate these two shades of green teal so much better. Vertompier is a really dusky, muted green. So it's definitely much more green than teal, like the Verde Gris. I have to say, the more I'm using this Dominant Industry glass dip pen and ink muddler, the more I'm appreciating it. It's actually really versatile, but it is so small that it's not very comfortable to hold, and I think my handwriting looks like a mess. I'm really scared any minute it's going to just slip out between my fingers and smash down on my writing desk and crack. Especially doesn't help when I'm having to swap between this dip pen and this paintbrush. Love this color. Hate the name. I've never heard of takasago paper before I purchased these swatch cards. I really love it. I think it might be a bit of a rival to Tomoe River paper. I do find that when I'm painting the ink here in this little gradient part, I find it doesn't hold the water as well as I think Tomoe River paper does. But then again, I'm not someone who has had extensive experience using watercolor paints or anything like that in my Tomoe River journals. Yeah, if Dominant Industry releases a notebook with takasago paper, I would be quite curious to try it for everyday journaling or planning. All right, so last year, when I dramatically grew my collection of Herbin inks, the last one that I bought is this, and I confess I have not to date inked any of my pens with this ink. And when I start writing with it, you might realize how foolish that is, because it's absolutely gorgeous. L'Âme de Cassis. This is a stunning, deep fuchsia. And I feel about it a very similar way that I feel about an ink I don't own, which is Pilot Iroshizuku Yamabudo, which I think is a similar deep fuchsia or purple ink, but I believe Yamabudo has a really gorgeous gold sheen. And I really admire this color, even though in everyday use it's probably a little bit too loud for me. I tend to really like the muted colors, like Vertompier, Verde Gris. That's really up my alley in terms of staring at my journal entries every single day. But it doesn't mean I'm not someone who doesn't appreciate the way these really vibrant colors look. All right, the more I'm using takasago paper, the more I'm falling in love. It's so incredibly smooth. Gosh, and it just really helps the ink spread all over and pool in beautiful ways. You can see in the swatch cards that are drying, like, can you see why I love Ombre de Birmanie? Like, look at that shading. Wow. I'm adapting to the different personalities of the wearingeul and the takasago. So I'm glad I'm actually not juggling my Tomoe River paper and Midori paper notebooks here as well. But I will show you some of the finished product if I get some swatching done in the coming days or weeks. So next up is, aside from my Platinum Carbon Black, these are my only other two Japanese inks. And they're in a category of their own, not only because these two are probably my best performing inks. They're some of my favorite inks to use. They are also the two Japanese inks that I actually bought in Japan when I traveled there in March, April last year. Pilot Iroshizuku Kirisame is currently the only Iroshizuku ink that I own, but I found it every bit worth its reputation as a stunningly wet, well-behaved, fascinating warm grey shading ink. I believe the name means something to the effect of misty rain. Some I've heard people translate it as autumn rain. I'm not sure. But I think the misty rain perfectly encapsulates how this ink makes me feel. It's very atmospheric. Because it's a shading ink, sometimes depending on how it flows and what type of pen you use, it can come off as very light. Like this swatch right now looks very light. But I find when it actually comes out of a pen, a wet pen, it doesn't look too light at all. I find it perfectly legible. But how sad this color has been discontinued. I think I heard the news just a few months after I purchased it. And it was funny that that was the one that I picked out of the entire line as the one that I wanted to purchase a full bottle of. And I purchased this in an open air market in Tokyo that was open since the Second World War called Ameyoko. And they sell a lot of discount goods. And there's a particular store there called Marui Shoten that I think has been open for many decades. And I purchased this full bottle of Kirisame for about $14-15 Australian. And technically, you find this for anything $35-40 here in our local retailers. So my dream is to go back to Japan with an empty suitcase and purchase all the rest of the line. He had it in his cabinet as well, every single color in Pilot Iroshizuku's line. And yes, but I was very restrained, which is usually a characteristic that serves me quite well. This is Sailor Shikiori Yozakura. And it's also a beautiful shading ink that comes out as a somewhere between a pink and a lilac. And I love putting this in my sailor pens. I've never had this ink not perform well, irrespective of which pen I ink it up in. It looks very light, but it's actually not. My shading inks seem to be doing that, actually. When they flow out of a fountain pen nib, it's usually significantly more saturated. Look at the shading. Wow. So the remaining inks in my collection are all diamine inks. And they're very affordable, particularly because I do love buying all my inks from UK retailers. And it gave me an opportunity to branch out into inks with a lot more shimmer. I'll start off with the first ones that I purchased. So this, like my Herbin inks, were purchased from Pure Pens, but I wouldn't recommend them. They came in a box with no padding and they leaked everywhere. So I wasn't that excited. A couple of the boxes that my inks came in were also soaked with inks that leaked. So I will probably try to find another ink supplier that I can be sure will package things safely so I can get all my bottles in one piece. This was a color that I knew I would love, and it did not disappoint at all. This is Diamine Celadon Cat. I believe it was created in collaboration with a Reddit community. So fountain pen lovers really do know how to design beautiful inks. It's another gorgeous shader. I think by now you can tell that shading is definitely my favorite property in fountain pen inks. And this to me is just the most exquisite shade of blue-green that I know it's called Celadon, but every time I look at it, it makes me think of jade. But it also reminds me of my travels in Chiang Mai, where I had the most exquisite afternoon tea with all Celadon teaware. This ink is also a really good performer for me. It's not the wettest ink in the world, but it's never dry. I'm going to be very careful with these next two inks because they do have a tendency to smear quite a lot, even though they may just be some of my favorite colors. Do you see how this ink has shades of brown underneath it, even though it looks like this rich, luxurious red? For me, I've actually been quite nervous when I've written with diamine oxblood at work and I'm cleaning up my inky fingers and things like that in tissue paper. And I'm like, is the cleaner going to think that I stabbed myself? Like, it is so similar to blood. It genuinely is. I don't know why I kept that. I still need to do the swatches. You can also see on the rim of this glass bottle that it does also have a tendency to crust up. And I hear that's because of a compound that's in a lot of red and orange inks. So it gets a little bit crusty. It doesn't mean that the ink is off. It's just what red inks do. And I wonder if it's the same compound that also gives it a tendency to smear, particularly in warmer climates. I've had people, when I've complained about oxblood and ancient copper in the past, that they swear their bottles don't smear whatsoever. As a beginner, I'm not sure these were the best inks for me to get into my fountain pen hobby with because they are so high maintenance with the smearing. Again, your results might vary. But now that I am an experienced fountain pen user, and I've been using fountain pens pretty much every single day for the last 3 years, I do think that I would actually naturally just be better at being careful with my writing, with using my pencil boards, with using different blotting papers, that I probably wouldn't be bumping and smearing it as frequently as I did when I first began using these inks. I recently met someone in my Southeast Queensland Journal Keepers group who had a Mont Blanc pocket pen inked up with ancient copper. And when she let me try it, I was like, oh, I recognize this ink. And it gave me a newfound appreciation for it. It's again one of those really fascinating colors where your brain just fixates on the stunning hue, and it's like trying to make out if it's brown or if it's red. And every time you look at it with a different light, it just looks different. So I love it when inks are complex, whether that is because it shades or it has a unexpected sheen, or it's just one of those hues that are somewhere in between really clear color categories. And it's almost like a puzzle. It makes you look at it and want to look again and again. Now, one thing I didn't expect when starting this little project was how long ink swatches take. And I've no doubt that it's because I'm inexperienced. And if I didn't have to swap back and forth with the paintbrush to do this gradient swatch, I would probably be a lot faster. But I definitely want to get as many swatches done for you today as I possibly can, because I personally love watching ink swatching videos when they've purchased a big box of samples and they're going through like 20 inks at a time. But I underestimated the skill and the coordination required to do swatches effectively and efficiently. You can see how similar oxblood and ancient copper is, but you know what, actually this gradient is helpful because you do see the kind of base element of each color. So this is clearly an orange and this is clearly a red. So fascinating, the nuances between these two beautiful inks, and beautiful in their own right, despite their similarities. Okay, I think my oxblood can go with my Traveler's Notebook Love and Trip. This is one shimmer ink I've used quite a lot in my books. This is Diamine Gold Star from their Inkvent collection, which after it's released as an advent calendar becomes made into full bottles. So it's actually an orange ink with the most generous amount of gold particles, and I really hope it comes out in this dip test. It's actually probably going to be a full minute or two when the ink dries down that I can see how much shimmer particles happen to be captured, suspended throughout this test. Do you know what? It just occurred to me I should probably shake it up again. It's only been 2 minutes, but when you're doing the sample, you might as well do it right. No point if my sample doesn't capture the shimmer. Let's keep going with the shimmers. So this is Diamine Shimmering Seas. It's a deep navy with gold shimmer. Diamine Night Sky. I believe it's a black, maybe a blue black with silver shimmer. You can really see that it's not pure black. There's an undertone of deep blue, even purple. Although as it's drying, it's starting to look more grey. So interesting. Oh, I just love it when inks are so multi-dimensional. And I like how the colour of the cap matches the shimmer particles. So it's a nice visual reminder what you're going to get with this ink. Oh, and it's not all Diamine. My last ink that I'm swatching for you out of my collection is Emerald de Chivor, Jacques. I can't wait to see how Emerald de Chivor dries down. and I can show off all the shimmer and sheen properties of this exquisitely opulent ink. So I think I'm going to break here, start organizing all of these different cards, give them some time to set, to dry. I'll see you in a moment. So as I promised, the end of this video is going to showcase this wonderful little package I received just yesterday from Little Coco Studio and Alison, who has just been such a wonderful friend and source of support for me since I started my channel a few months ago. I wasn't sure that this package would arrive so quickly because I know that Canada Post is having strikes again. So when this showed up, it really was just a delightful surprise. So a few weeks ago, Alison reached out to me to ask if I would like to try some of her inks as samples. And I was so touched by her generous offer, and I got to have a look at her formidable collection. It was a challenge limiting myself to a selection and not just say, I want to look at all of your inks, because she really has some beautiful inks in her collection. And she seems to share my love of brown. And there were many, many different shades of autumnal colors that I'm so excited to try. I can already tell this is looking like more than, oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you, Alison, so much for this beautiful pen sleeve. Oh, this is so gorgeous. I'm going to put that to very good use. Oh, seems like she shared some pipettes with me. So I guess if I want to make samples of my own or to test these, oh, that would be so lovely. Oh, it looks like there's a little selection of washi tape stickers, PET tapes that I will definitely be decorating my journal spreads with. Wow. Oh, a stationery shop in Toronto. That's amazing. Oh, all right. I'm going to read the letter off camera. And these are the samples that I begged of Alison to share with me. These look like a lot. Did I really ask for this? I don't think I did. I think I asked for 10, didn't I? Oh God, if I did, I'm so sorry. I feel like Alison gave me a few extras. I'm going to have to go back and check my emails. That's amazing. Okay, but I confess the swatches that I made of my 19 inks, that took me 2 hours. I really didn't think it was going to take me that long. And my phone is pretty much about to die. So I'm going to end my filming here, but at the end of the video, you will see all the swatches that I did. I'll come back with my collection and show you what everything looks like once they've dried down. But please come back for a part 2 when I am going to swatch out all of these samples that Alison shared with me, and also try out the inks in my Tomoe River paper and my Midori paper notebooks as well. So please stay tuned for the next Inky Play video. For now, I want to thank you so much for joining me for creating my ink catalogue. And I hope that from here on out, it is going to give me such an accessible bird's eye view of my full collection that will enable me to make more diverse and intentional decisions about how I ink up my pens. I hope to make better use of my collection, to not let some bottles languish in the back of a drawer and forgetting that I even bought it in the first place. And hopefully, as I develop up my supplies and my tools, I would love to pay it forward, as Alison has done with me, and share some of my collection with you. So I'll see you in the final part when I show you what all the inks look like after they've dried down. So my ink swatches have now dried overnight, and I wanted to take the time to show you everything I swatched with you earlier. Let's start with the dominant industry paper. Platinum Carbon Black, Herbin Pearl Noir, Herbin Lit d'été, Herbin Lierre Sauvage, Herbin Poussière de Lune, Herbin Ombre de Birmanie, Herbin Rouillé d'encre, Herbin Vert de Gris, Herbin Vert Empire, Herbin Lame de Cassis, Pilot Iroshizuku Kirisame, Sailor Shikiori Yozakura, Diamine Oxblood, Diamine Ancient Copper, Diamine Celadon Cat, Diamine Gold Star, Diamine Shimmering Seas, Diamine Night Sky, and Jacques Herbin Emerald de Chivor. And this is how they look on the wearingeul ink drop cards. I would love to hear in the comment section what you think of my collection of fountain pen inks. Which ones do you own? Which ones do you love and wish you owned? And which ones are maybe really not your tastes? I'd be so curious to hear more about your collection and your ink preferences. In the coming weeks, I will strive to make a second part of this video, and I will start swatching in my Midori paper and Tomoe River notebooks. And I will also open up and explore these wonderful samples that Alison from Little Coco Studio so kindly shipped to me from Canada. Next week, I'm going to bring you a mid-year review of my planner and journal stack, including a discussion of some of the things that I have abandoned and some of the things that I intend to add into my rotation. So I hope you'll stay subscribed and join me next week when I go through my Techo Kaigi with you. Thank you so much for being here today. I wish you a wonderful week ahead, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.